Bullavanaka. Hello, everybody. My name is Bob McDevitt, and I've been invited to give a presentation of the weather forecast for leg 6 of the World ARC rally across the Pacific from Vuda in Fiji to Tanna in Vanuatu. And the question is, when is the best time to go? Well, sit back and listen, and I'll try and explain everything. The best thing we have in terms of an official weather map drawn by humans, taking into account all the observations and all the satellite imagery, not just what the models do, comes from Met Service in New Zealand, and here it is, with streamlines drawn in the tropics and isobars in the mid-latitudes. It gives us a good general idea of what's going on. And at first glance, it looks okay in the tropics. Here's the South Pacific Convergence Zone. There's really not much to it. It's sitting over Solomon Islands. It's well away from Fiji. There's a passing trough heading towards the French Polynesian, but it's way over there. It's not affecting Fiji. A little bit of problems between Fiji and New Zealand with this cold pool coming into all these fronts. That will produce a low tomorrow, which will rundle off to the southeast. That's not really a problem. The problem is this anticyclone over Tasmania. If you can read it, the central pressure is 1,041 hectopascals. Every extra isobar that you throw onto the weather map pushes the isobars together. So this crunch or squash zone of isobars, which is currently in the Tasman Sea, going to be taken onto New Caledonia and Vanuatu and then Fiji as this high moves into the Tasman Sea and follows this low. Let's have a look at that in more detail on windy.com. I should point out that map from Met Service was noon Wednesday. Here's noon Wednesday on windy.com, the EC model. The EC model is probably the best one to look at if you're just looking at one model. What I can do with my expedition is merge several models together, and that gives us an interesting outcome. Anyway, here we have the anticyclone over the Tasmania region, and if we skip through to noon on Thursday, as you can see, this amber area of crunched isobars, the squash zone here behind this low, is starting to be pushed towards the New Caledonia area. But over Fiji, it's not much. There's a little bit of a trough moving across. Might be a shower or two on Thursday at your place, around somewhere. Now I have a look at noon on Friday. There we go. You can see that the squash zone in the Coral Sea is now already touching the New Caledonia area, getting ready to go on to Vanuatu. Over Fiji, it's calm again after that trough's gone through. In fact, it might be a little sunny enough to give you sea breezes for the start on Friday. That means that if you do leave from Muscat Cove after the sea breezes set in, then you've got a westerly winds from there through Narvula Passage. If you want to avoid the sea breeze, go early. Now, looking at noon on Saturday, you can see that the squash zone is well over the Coral Sea and is now spread into the area from Fiji to Vanuatu. It's a problem. Noon on Sunday, it's still a problem. Noon on Monday, it's the biggest problem you've ever seen. But noon on Tuesday, it's see how the squash zone itself continues to move east as the high, which is responsible for it, moves on to New Zealand. noon on Tuesday. It's still around Fiji, but it's beginning to weaken. Noon on Wednesday. The Fijian area actually kind of acts as a shelter and creates a nice little lee zone between Fiji and towards Vanuatu. And finally, noon on Thursday is interesting because the new low or front, which is developing along the Australian seaboard here with its own northeasterly flow, begins to merge with the squash zone, so that noon on Friday and then noon on Saturday we have very strong conditions continuing over the New Caledonian area. Correction, from the Fiji to the Tasman Sea area. Now, there are a couple of tricks I can show you that you can do with windy, and one is what is called the wind accumulation, which looks like this. And we can set it for the next 24 hours, which looks like this. Remember, this is from noon on Wednesday. It shows you that between Fiji and New Caledonia, there's no great problem. But if we look at the next 3 days, the squash zone becomes apparent over the Coral Sea and moving eastwards. And if we look at over the next 5 days, like so, the next 5 days from Wednesday, it's affixed the zone from Fiji to New Caledonia and to New Vanuatu. And then if we look over the next 10 days, like so, the squash zone has travelled from here to all the way to French Polynesia in that time, all thanks to this high which is moving over New Zealand. Another thing we can look at is the rain accumulation, which looks like this. And that's quite exciting for the next 10 days. Rain accumulation. Oops, there we go. That's better. And it shows you the South Pacific Convergence Zone up here, in that region there. It shows you the rain that comes even in the squash zone, affecting over the next 10 days, this little trough out here. But there's no real problems between Fiji and Vanuatu as far as the rain is concerned. The South Pacific Convergence Zone stays to the north up here. That's good. Right, so here we are. This is Thursday at 5:30, the 4th of July. And as you can see, south of Musket Cove, through Vuda Passage, these tidal streams are going outwards quite fast. So this is a good time to start. Now we will go backwards, zoom out until we get a good view of the route, which is from Vuda to Tanna. And then we will ask our computer to calculate a optimal passage. And here it is. You can see that it wants to go south. And we can actually step through the passage bit by bit and see that at that time there we'll probably have to turn the motor on because the winds are light and against us, but they will turn from southwesterly around to southerly as we go west. The problem comes on Saturday, which is when the squash zone starts to move in from the southwest. These southeasterly winds gradually increase, and what we have here is the barbs showing the wind speed coloured for their actual speed knots and the direction you can see. These grey zones here are the significant metres of swell. And this one here shows you the significant metre swells. That zone there is all 4 metre swells. As we get closer to Tanna, you can see that the 4 metre swell line moves closer to us, and there at on Sunday at in the afternoon, we encounter the 4 metre swells before we can get to Tanna, and this is even with a Thursday afternoon departure. But if we zoom back through there and then toggle the speed, you can see that 4 metre swell line comes and goes. So maybe if we left a little bit later from Fiji, we could perhaps not quite avoid it altogether, but minimize noon state and examine its contents. So we can have a look at the wind itself as being streamlines, and zoom back to the start of the trip, like so. You can see that at the beginning of the trip, there is fairly light winds from the northwest, from the northeast, as we go through a little trough line there, through that trough line there, and that is at on Friday, in late morning Friday. Then the southwesterlies come. We might have to motor through those and go through the green, and then the lime areas, finally encountering the strong winds, the southerlies there on Saturday morning, going through those, actually having a little slight drop in the wind speed, and then back to the strong winds of the amber area. And in fact, at that stage, there is even some near gale zones slightly further to the south of the trip, which we encounter as 25 to 30 knot winds on Sunday afternoon before we can get into Tanna. Another thing, we trip in more detail by looking at the swell in significant metres and seeing that they basically, the red lines here shows you the rain. So this is the swell and the rain. And as we move towards Tanna, there's that 4 metre swell line, which is pretty well unavoidable, I would say, but we can mitigate the time that we spend in it. So here is a summary of the Thursday afternoon, 6 p.m. from Vuda passage departure. By about midnight on Friday, you should have a waypoint at 19 south, 176 east, going southwest at first, and 226 degrees true. Then we can go direct and take on the southerlies, turning southeasterly. Peak wind is expected to be 25 gusting 30 knots on Sunday around here, and at about the same time as the peak swell, significant metres of around 4.3 metres or so from the southeast, with a period of around about 10 seconds on Sunday, just easing as you get into Tanna. Okay, so that's the path for a Thursday, late Thursday departure. Let's see what happens now if we set the time to a noon Friday departure. What does the computer come up with? Something which is more straight, but still has a kick to the north of the path, the direct path at some stage. This deviation is done to try and mitigate the effect of that 4 metre swell. Overall, it has much the same, the strong winds and the heavy swell for a short time. But if we zoom into the start, through Vuda Passage around about noon on Friday, the inflow of the tide is against the start. Also, there's a westerly flow, which is part of a incoming trough. That westerly wind swings around to a southwesterly soon after the start. That little arrow there is in fact a southwesterly current. So there are a few problems, I guess, at the start of a Friday noon departure. So here is a summary of a Friday noon departure from Vuda Passage against the incoming tide. And first waypoint is to go southwest in a westerly breeze to 18 degrees 10 minutes south, 177 east. Then go almost due west to 18 degrees 20 south, 171 east in the southerly winds. At that point, we pick the 4-metre swells. In fact, the peak swell should be about 4.2 metres from the southeast, and with a period of 10 seconds on Sunday, plus also the peak gusts. The peak winds should be around 27, gusting 32 knots at around about the same time on Sunday. This graph here, map, shows the yellow and the green colours here for the wind speed and barbs, but also gives you the directions of the swell. Let us now look at a Saturday start, the nominal date for the start being Saturday. And here's a picture for noon start. Remember, around noon, the tide is still coming in around Vuda Passage, hence that red arrow going inwards. We could wait until 5, 6 o'clock when the tide's going out if you want. Anyway, the optimum path at this stage is as follows. And it looks more direct than the other two starts. However, there's a lot more in the way of strong winds, southeasterlies quite strong throughout the whole passage. Plus also you start with a southerly of 20 knots. So I don't know if it's anybody's cup of tea, but that's what it looks like. And finally, please be aware that all the forecasts that I've been presenting here is typically done by marine forecasters giving the averages. Now, the winds, I have also been giving the gusts, but remember that they're about 40% stronger than the average. And also, I give the significant height of the waves in metres, but the maximum waves can be twice as high as what's given in the forecast. So the forecast is given in averages, but you've got to prepare for the maximums, the extremes. Anyway, bon chance and bon voyage.